I'm at the moment doing my part-time PhD at the Royal College of Art. I have been working as a textile and fashion designer for the last 20 odd years as an independent surface print designer. So surface print is where I'm at, and basically everyone's been using and doing some amazing kind of things in structure, 3D printing. Mine is definitely about the surface and looking at how we can use 3D printing on that level. So looking at 3D printing as a craft, textiles, and kind of hacking the machine. So mine is basically my whole research is on this FFF printing of an Ultimaker from an Ultimaker machine. I have my first, I had no understanding of 3D printing at all before I started the Royal College. So I was kind of in total kind of, I'm just a textile designer, no understanding about being techie in 3D at all, and I'd really like to find out more. So I spent my time in the industrial design section, where they had a kind of a room full of Ultimakers and MakerBots, and this very nice technician who's basically said, oh yeah, you know, I'll teach you all about this machine. And I was like, oh, that's really great, because I'm going to do these fantastic things. And so he was kind of like, okay, that one doesn't work, but that one does. And so I spent about a month in this room trying to get some things out of this. And my first kind of idea was how. I was thinking, like, how do I even start? So in my practice, I'd been using like printing lace throughout my all my collections, and when I did collections in lace for Fashion Week and London Fashion Week, and so I thought, well, this is a good place to start. You know, what if I could kind of print lace in 3D, in a 3D sort of way? So I went to Nottingham Lace, and Nottingham, found out about lace making and looked into like bobbin lace, and then I also sort of looked into how all our sort of contemporary designers, like fashion designers, were using kind of lace as well. And the only way I could kind of relate to lace in 3D was through using puff ink. So that's where I kind of started. I went back into the print room and said, right, okay, that's it. I'm going to print in 3D, but using a puff ink to understand what I want and how I could visualize 3D print in textiles, really, in surface design. And then I started to look at net formations and thinking, well, how am I going to, you know, I've got no idea how I'm going to get this from the drawing stage to the 3D printer. And at this point I was thinking, and also I need a 3D printer, I need one to take home with me and basically hack to death, because I don't know how to use this thing. And 2 hours booked in the ID department is not going to help me. So basically I approached Career Education, and they loaned me a machine, and they have loaned me this machine all the way through my PhD and continue to do that. So if there are anyone from here, from there, I'd just like to thank them, because it wouldn't have been possible even for me to get this far. So then I started to kind of think, okay, I sort of had attempts at working with all the 3D software and putting kind of hexagon kind of shapes together, and coming from the kind of background where I am not, I don't look at formulas in any kind of way. Even when I create, I sort of tend to kind of take ordered things and destroy them. So I've always sort of approached fashion in that way, and all my garments are always really distressed, and all my prints are always really distressed, and so I look at everything sort of deconstructed. So I attempted to use all these programs, and the only ones that for me were just a godsend was Cura, Tinkercad. Obviously Photoshop I already knew, and also Illustrator. So these were my buddies basically for 3D printing, and I just felt that if I could use all these elements, I would be able to do all sorts of things in surface printing, although I had to start right from the beginning. And this was my really like beginning that were really, I mean, I had no idea about brims, rafts, anything. So anything I got out, I thought was just amazing, which was kind of really a bit, so these were my like kind of attempts of my first printing. And then I started to kind of think, okay, well, what if I was going to like print a garment, you know, out of this? What would I need to do? Well, I'd need to kind of fix it to fabric, because I couldn't envision it being a fabric within itself, because I wasn't talking about structure, you know, I was looking at it as a surface print. So I just started to think of what lace is and how it behaves, and if you printed on top of it, would it behave differently? And there were sort of episodes of me getting kind of different structures as I stretched the lace and printed it. And but I sort of, it wasn't enough for a garment, although I'm still at this experimental stage because I'm still like in the first year of my PhD. So there is so much more to learn and so much more to develop. So you're getting the sort of newbie kind of 3D printer. So I sort of devised a kind of mood board, which is kind of how I would attempt to print any garment. And managed to get a few 3D printed lace kind of constructions, which were like in clear TPU, and then I sort of designed this sort of Elizabethan kind of style inspired ruffle with a ruffle collar, and decided that I was going to add the net to it, so it would be half kind of 3D printed and devore. So I was using like a poly cotton, and that's how I would kind of sort of construct it. Anyway, this was the beginnings of it. This was the sleeve and the neck, and I was ecstatic at this moment, because I was like, oh my God, it's stuck to it. Why? You know, and so there were all these questions. Like, I was kind of thinking, you know, why is it that where the print and the devore has taken away the cotton and left the polyester, and then the TPU is sticking to it? And then, of course, you know, I was kind of looking into that further and realised it was like temperature, and that there was a melting point for each material that I was using. So basically, I had this shirt now that was kind of all right. We just sort of got to a stage, at least I was kind of showing that there was some sort of possibility of printing with 3D print on a garment. And so I started to think about, wow, you know, well, what if, probably ahead of myself, but what if, you know, we could see the 3D printer, this little Ultimaker, as the future sewing machine, and how would we sort of envision that, and what would we do? So I kind of played around with a little film just to kind of hopefully cheer you up if it's got some sound. It has got sound, but we haven't got sound. Okay, have we got any sound here? No. Anyway, the idea was it was basically a trigger for thought to bring the kind of idea of 3D printing into kind of the understanding that it could be a possible like making process for application in terms of print, you know, so we could like decorate, we could, you know, form a garment. So it was just a kind of trigger really of making people think of it like that, you know. So I sort of 3D printed the button and the buttons for the shirt, added pieces of lace on it, joined the lace and heated it like you would a seam. So heated it so it would go together. So it was just drawing these comparisons as a sort of interesting kind of little trigger that everyone could kind of look at and go, that's a thought. So, and I love the idea that this machine was portable. You could have it at home, and it opens up so much more possibilities in terms of 3D printing. So for me, this was like a bit of fun. Okay, now it's gonna, right. Okay, so now I started to kind of really get to grips with the fact that it was, I could actually use this machine almost like an embroidery machine. And I was drawing and I was using Photoshop and Illustrator and just using it to take into Tinkercad and then just basically 3D print on the fabric. But what I realised is the one on the left is the most successful print I had, I would say, and it does lend itself to a lot more investigation. Reason being that you'll see the sample here is that when you printed on it, I printed it stretched, so it works like you would a normal sort of textiles in terms of printing on stretch fabric and then releasing it, and then it creates a pattern. But what was interesting about this is the TPU embedded really into the fabric, which was really amazing for me because I just looked at it for the first time as a real textile that I could actually use in a garment. So for me, that is an element of my research will probably go into that direction where it won't be just lace, but it will be other things that I'll be looking at. So hopefully I'll have some other things to develop. So this was one of the first kind of embroidery style kind of things I'd done, and I started to 3D print on the hoop. I don't know, it just made me feel like it was more sort of tactile, and I was still a textile designer, although I was using this machine. So, and what happened is that I would stop, and I still do. I stop the machine halfway through, or not even halfway through, 10 minutes through, depending on what I see and what I like. So if it's like 5 minutes into the print, I just stop it. If I like what I see, I just stop. So there was a real sort of interaction going on with me and the printer. You know, I was kind of really sort of looking at it like I'm almost sort of drawing with it and interacting like an embroidery machine with it. And then I started to think, okay, well, how could I use this without the fabric? You know, would it like print these things in a really lovely, soft kind of way? So I printed some of them without, and actually, for me, all the lines and the thread and everything I thought were really beautiful. So I kept them and thought that's a really successful print for me. You know, it shows the process, and and they were like paper. They were really, so they could be used for like applique or something. You know, I could see some sort of, and then I sort of thought, okay, well, what if I could take like something like a weave, so I had a sample of bobbin lace that was like French bobbin lace, and I thought, okay, you know, what if I could scan this and the 3D printer could, how would it like transfer that information to the 3D print? So that's what I did. And I sort of came up with this methodology for me in terms of thinking, well, maybe that's something quite interesting to look at, is that you take a piece of bobbin lace and all the threads and all the mathematical weaving process can be picked up through the scan, and then produce this actually quite beautiful piece of 3D printed bobbin lace. And to me, I thought that was quite exciting, because when you look at it closely, you see these kind of threads where obviously the computer has picked up all the vector file sections of the of the piece. But I just thought, to me, that was, it was something to look at further. So let's stop that. It's just basically printing it. And then I took another piece of Bolognese and thought, well, will it do the same thing? And it did. And then I realised that as, obviously, the more you print, the longer you print, the more builds you get, and you get a kind of different texture. But it was, what I loved about it is that it looked almost embroidered or woven, but in a sort of mad kind of digital kind of way. And so I kind of did the kind of stages of like, okay, that's like 10 minutes, that's 20 minutes, and that's like too much, where I lose everything. So it's, that was kind of where my research has kind of got me. So yeah, that's hopefully in the next few years, I've still got like 4 years of PhD left at the RCA, that will, I will show you some more. Okay, thank you.